Hey, Carter.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We've gathered here today. We wrote an article last week. Ellen and I were running around, happened to be in DC and then Annapolis at the
Outside of Annapolis.
Tufts
Yes.
event. And we were at Heritage for an event where Heritage brought together a lot of the regenerative agriculture people to talk about food as health. And we wrote a piece last Friday, on some of the details from that, and it covered many details. We just ran out of time to put it in a post, and so we thought we would go through that post and go into some greater depth on each one of the points for you all. If you
Well,
read,
and I mean, in all fairness, like, I don't think we've had a chance to truly debrief.
yeah, so
I
it's a
think
good.
people think like when we're together in the same room, we're like, but we're completely separate in terms of taking in all the inputs and trying to process it. And we
Yeah,
haven't had
lots,
magic to do it.
a lot of side conversations, and so now it's a good time to sort of get through the thinking. I think that it was really sort of profound in terms of the network of people that we spent some time with. It is all when you really sit down with other practitioners that are really doing important work. It causes our own minds to bend a little bit. So here's a good opportunity to dig in.
Yeah.
And
So
the only
I
other
wanted
thing is, if anybody gets something from here, please reach out to us directly. We're really trying to formulate our.
this is this is an attempt at a format, right? It's getting real live information out to people that want to hear what we're seeing. And I'm sure you've had the same. I've had at least 3 different people ask me in the last day if I've heard anything about the Maha report, if there's anything interesting happening at CMS, at CMMI. So we're in the middle of it. Should we start with the Heritage Foundation and maybe just kind of run through it? Let's talk about the 2 events first. So the Heritage Foundation event was a 2-panel really overview on regenerative ag. And it was meant to educate a lot of DC folks and also people like you and I. Maybe we're not the right examples to use, but just everyday people around power of regenerative agriculture and why it's such a hot topic. And you happened to be, there were 2 different panels, and you happened to be one of the panelists on the second panel.
Correct. So we had a panel which you can find on YouTube under Heritage, and we'll give you the link. Everybody who's on the panels were fantastic. I really got it. The night before, I got it some time to really sit down with John Kempf, who really is a tremendous resource in the regenerative agriculture effort. He and I spent a couple hours talking, which we've not really had a chance to do. We ran into our colleague Aaron Martin, and so did some craziness with Aaron through the nights, but a lot of dinners and things on the side. So the Heritage event Heritage is trying to focus on really trying to understand agriculture. It's not really a policy area that they've concentrated before, but certainly as you think about it, it's a mark that now people who've concentrated a lot on healthcare are starting to look over into the food area and what that's going to be. There are a lot of sort of the Maha crowd is there, and I think they're learning a lot about agriculture and the process, and people in agriculture are learning about some of their concerns about chemicals. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for discussion.
So the agenda was panel 1 was, is regenerative agriculture sustainable at scale? And I must admit, I was fangirling. We had really just some tremendous OGs on the stage. We had Rick Clark, Joel Salatin, David Stelzer, and Jennifer Gallardi was the moderator from Heritage. And then the second panel was the panel you were on, and it was Innovations in Agriculture, Unlocking Opportunity Through Technology. And Colleen Cavanaugh was on it. John Kempf was on it. You were on it. And then Jay Richards was your moderator. And I was a fly on the wall in the room, recording, observing. And what I really appreciated about the event was the depth of content that was covered and just the information that was shared. I feel like a lot of times those things, you hear the same thing over and over again, and it's too short or it's too long, the whole thing. And it was truly not a sales pitch for the individual on the stage. It was really a forum to put forth regenerative agriculture as a solution at scale and as a critical component to the whole Maha movement. And I thought it was super powerful. So that was so. And then Callie Means was one of the folks that started off the whole thing along with Ryland Englehart. So it was just a really powerhouse crowd and powerhouse stage. So that was the first part. You want to say anything about that? Because then I'm going to jump
I
in.
want to add that we've been focused on food as health for more than 10 years, long
Yep.
before Maha came along. We have respect for the efforts that they're bringing coalitions together. I think that there's a little bit of uncertainty as to whether Maha is a temporary thing. Is it RFK created Maha, or did Maha create RFK?
Yeah.
And is this a movement that is going to last for a little bit of while and disappear, or is it a basis of consumers? I think this is the issue is, if for the CPGs, the Nestle's of the world, and for agriculture, as we've thought through innovation, as investors at iSelect, as we've thought through innovations, that we really want consumer signal coming in. And so my intrigue around Maha is a little bit of, this is a consumer voice.
Yeah.
And it's, if we've got a $1.7 trillion food system, it represents a component of voice that, if we're driving innovation, what does every startup need? They need a customer. So if we have a customer base doing this, and I think as you think back at a CPG, is, they're trying to sense, should we change our products? Should we make them healthier? Should we do Oreo Reese's peanut butter cups, or should we do?
Oh, wait, today's the pre-order. Today you can pre-order that, by the way, Carter.
I'm not doing that, or are we talking about, integrating center of the store with real food? And so, I found it intriguing to sort of hear those concerns and voices, and sort of the visceral kind of drive that a political movement has. From a standpoint of the food as health effort, our question is whether we can increase the volume of customers out there to really sort of represent, are people interested in better, healthier food, or are they just looking for cheap stuff? And
well, it's the demand, right? It's what so many of the CPGs are just pointing to that, saying, well, there's no demand. And that's the big question but isn't there demand? And so that kind of leads us, I feel like you just perfectly led us to the second event, which I rushed off to after the Heritage event. You then joined me the next day, and we were with our other bestie. We have lots of them, but one of our other besties, Katie Stebbins, one of our esteemed hardcore co-hosts on this show. And, she leads the Tufts Food Nutrition Innovation Council, and it was the annual meeting. And she made, to give everybody some context on that, if you're unaware, so Tufts has two different commitments really towards food. A lot of folks are familiar with the Food as Medicine Institute, which is Dari Mozafarian. And then there's also the institute that Katie leads, which is the Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute. And we have a council. And so I'm a co-chair on I happen to be a co-chair of the Food is Health Working Group. There are multiple, I think there's 6 working groups. My co-chair is Colleen Zammer of Bay State Milling. And I find that particular group just amazing for really, Katie just really steps up to the plate and tries to nail, how do we move food forward? And I think you and I talked about this. I know I talked about this with a number of folks at the end of the event, which ended on Thursday evening. And we all commended Katie post-event and said, what a bold move that was by you, of bringing some of the top CPGs in the world into a room, and it wasn't a room, it was a farm.
Yep. It was a
And the
farm.
theme was regenerate 2025, and it was to imagine, right? And we can't steal Katie's thunder, but we can share that the entire event walked us through, all of those were there, this amazing process of how could I change and adopt to a more regenerative approach to food. And it was fantastic. So that was the other event that we were at. So needless to say, it was quite I'm still processed. Like, I feel like I need to just sit in a room and let it all just like settle in for another day or two, but I don't have time for that. So here we are.
Well, so we dove in. This is what we did, and we traveled around, and now we came up with certain policy positions and perspective that we posted on
So
Friday.
the first thing that you pointed out was from a policy perspective, and I think this is very heritage, and all of the things that we're working on with Maha. Outside of that, is the foundations are being poured, right?
Of the Maha report that's coming out, that was supposed to come out on the 12th.
Yep.
And has been delayed. So there were some core principles that we think we gleaned from that conversation. And so we can dive into those and what we might be seeing out of NIH and FDA in the next 2 or 3 weeks that may affect policy going forward.
Yep. So the first piece was, the whole indication that science is going to shift. I don't want to say shift, but NIH is going to really put a lot of energy into the science of nutrition. Not something we've historically really looked at, and
Yes.
That's an indication we were given.
So the building on that, just a quick history is we had the Ansel Keys effort that really sort of said fat was bad, and that sort of shifted perspective at FDA and NIH in terms of the research objectives. Away from understanding how fat and saturated fats and such fit into the diet. For a long time, NIH research has really been about 1.5 to 1.9 billion associated with nutrition out of their $49 billion budget.
Wait, say that again. I think people I need to put that in headlines.
Around sort of 1.5 to 1.9 billion dollars a year is spent by NIH on sort of nutritionally related items, and that could be nutritionally related to diabetes, but it could also be nutritionally related to cancer.
And in the scheme overall of NIH, how does that look?
Well, they've got 49 billion of R&D, so whatever. But chronic disease, which is mostly driven by nutrition, is 80% of our healthcare costs in the United States. So I think there's a question of whether we've got the priority set right now. When we had the Human Genome Project with Francis, Dr. Francis drove that. A great breakthrough, and a tremendous amount of post-human genome effort was much more focused around human genome, really because of the glow associated with that. And while that is, I've always thought that was very important work, there's a legitimate question of where is our balance in terms of, and so the signals we're getting is that really let's dig in and better understand the metabolic health. Let's understand the mitochondria. Can we get to the bottom of, I'm assuming this is where they're going based on other conversations. Can we understand the carb insulin model? And really dig in and apply more science to understand that. It's really been an area that's been under researched. We still don't really know the keto diet's healthy for you. I'm not trying to launch a missile in that case, but we just don't have a real fundamental study. And even things like is regenerative agriculture healthier for you? There's a debate. So the science community is there's been no randomized control trial on that. And so, anyway, so in the first instance, it appears NIH is going to really take a hard look at making shifts in this area that's going to upset people who are doing research or HIV and other areas. But it's against the pressure of 80% of our healthcare costs is related to chronic disease.
Chronic disease. And we think that one of the if, one of the absolute paramount drivers of that is what we eat,
Yes.
the inputs to the good old mitochondria. So kind of still along that same vein was dietary guidance. That was a big statement. Was we're going to really look at labeling a lot differently, front of pack labeling, things like that.
Yeah. So first on dietary guidelines, I
Oh
do
yeah,
know.
sorry, I mixed that one up because that one goes back to the grains.
So the general conversation is we're going to flip the pyramid, which really which I think means we're going to emphasize more around um, fiber, which is a good buffer for sugar, less on carbs, and then sort of agreeable on proteins. Um, there is a push to speed up this kind of change. This is a process that essentially there's normally about a 2-year process of what's the most recent research, what does it tell us, how should we change the dietary guidelines. There is some pushing and shoving going along around the fact that there's a push by FDA to sort of accelerate the new guidelines, do it in 3 months, not 2 years. And I think the science community is sort of like, well, we've always spent 2 years making sure we get this right, against the tension of, hey, do we have enough evidence that we should be emphasizing fiber? But I think with those dietary guidelines, if they do come out with more of an emphasis on dietary fiber, it really puts a huge pressure on the CPGs as to what's FDA recommended daily allowance and what do they do in terms of formulation.
Yep.
Um,
Which is
and
interesting. Somebody at the Tufts event, when I was sharing some of those early Maha, what we were told is likely to be in the report, somebody said, "Well, there's no more food pyramid. The food pyramid's gone. That was already eliminated." And I was like, "Oh, okay, there we go." But according to the Maha report, it is not, and we're looking at correcting that. And I think most people would not say that they think that the food pyramid is gone.
yes.
So jumping on that, let's stick with that theme in front of pack labeling.
But yeah, so my sense on the front of pack labeling, so this is put a black box on the front of the pack and say what you normally see on the back, but this is in some other, like in Mexico and Europe, if you've seen like cigarette ads now on the front of the pack of a cigarette ad, it says this will kill you and give you
Well, it's
cancer.
what I remember. I took pictures and sent it to you from
You did.
Turkey.
We should share those. So they front of pack means many things. One of the things about front of pack is, well, let's just give people information so it's easier for them to make a decision. The other is this a regulatory framework to force things on the front? Like this has fructose and may blow up
Yeah.
your liver. So, or this product can't prove it doesn't have Roundup in it. So this could manifest itself in a lot of different directions, but I like it from a principle of consumers get more information in a more clear way. I remain, and frankly, if people want to make a decision as to whether they care about Roundup or not without banning it, like, oh, we're going to put this awful warning on here, but we're still going to smoke. Um, that's, I think, giving people more information. The other thing we found from our friends over at Greenfield Robotics is what is front of package labeling in today's world. And what Greenfield does, Greenfield, a certain amount of corn, Greenfield can weed with a robot instead of using Roundup. And what they did
No
is
till, baby. No till.
they put a picture of the robot on the front of the corn packaging and said weeded by robot. So what we might see in sort of the Instagram world or the food babe world is how you communicate with consumers. The whole concept of labeling may be arcane. That influencers might, the process of a label is an education process. consumers and the process of how we educate a consumer. You were saying your son wanted to have something for dinner and gave you like a TikTok post to say, "Mom,
Well,
make this."
hey, this is how I get my recipes from my son. He literally sends me Instagram or TikTok reels. And my daughter the same. That's where they get their recipes.
And they included some of the products.
Yes. And they also, as I told you, they have a video that takes you through the whole making of the meal and the meal's done. And it's it's on hyperspeed. Like you're not watching somebody cook for 45 minutes. It's like a, 45-second clip. But what's deceiving, as I shared with you, is I followed the recipe. I did not watch the video. I'm old school. So I just basically screenshot the recipe and made it. And then my son said, "Well, what's this?" And I said, "Well, this is the cucumber salad that was in the recipe that you sent me the link to." And he's like, "But where's the rice?" I said, "Well, there was no rice in the recipe." So it's a completely different way to find what you want, right? To your point.
So I think that from an innovation standpoint, I think there's an opportunity to really, like when we've said for a while that when we mean food is health, we mean you should be able to walk into the store and it should be hard to make a bad decision. Like any of the
Yeah.
bread you buy is healthy for you and still tastes good. So it's a higher standard in that you shouldn't have to have a whole bunch of apps and you shouldn't have to make a whole bunch of different decisions. Your cognitive load of, you shouldn't be scared. The scariest thing in a family's life shouldn't be what's for dinner. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here where there's been 20 years of let's put front of package labeling on. I think that people should leave open the idea that TikTok might be the front of package labeling.
I think it
And
already is for
the kids' communication to mom and dad and that mom's job now is to come up with a less.
Well, I didn't even tell you. Perfect example. Much better example than the one you used. I didn't even tell you this one because you talk about Fairlife a lot.
Yeah.
And, I'm all into nutrient density. Like this is my game as well. And so Fairlife, we all like our ice cream in my family. We can't eat the ice cream for obvious reasons on a regular basis. I have a Ninja Creamy and it makes ice cream, right? It tastes just like ice cream, but I don't have to use all the stuff in it. So I make it. And one of the staples in there is milk. None of us have issues with dairy. And I use Fairlife because it has such a higher density of protein versus calories, right? It's a higher ratio because of the process. Both of my kids started yelling at me about the Fairlife because there's microplastics in it. And I'm like, there's not, what are you talking about? And so then I went out and researched, and I guess some study, found that the protein shakes that Fairlife makes had high levels of microplastics, like too high of a level. But I thought, right, I'm just looking at it as a consumer in the store. My kids are getting informed by TikTok. I mean, last night my son told me that this next hurricane's coming. It's going to get us because social media. So it's where people are getting their information. I completely agree. So
yeah, so I think package labeling is going to be really, it's good that we're moving in that conversation. And I think that,
you think we missed 10 steps though?
well, I just think that I think that some chaos is good in this case. Like we could go through a process of banning Roundup, or we could go through a process of saying there's Roundup in here.
Right. And let people decide.
And then some people might say, no, you shouldn't let them make that harm. But okay, so maybe Roundup is clear, but are microplastics clear?
Yeah.
And if people want to make a decision based on that, then just let them make that decision. And then the other part of it is the effort to get the packaging right is much slower than what social media is going to do.
Oh, totally.
If you're a CPG, you might very well be saying, look, okay, it's really cool, FDA, that you're thinking about a front of package labeling and maybe we should make this shift. But we've got people monitoring what they're saying on TikTok, and that's because people are coming into the store with mom being told what to buy and what products they're going to buy. That decision, the interface for simplifying the what's for dinner decision is happening way outside our store, and we're going to influence it in a different place.
I'll make one last point on this and then we'll move on because we have a bunch of big
Yep.
pillars to go into. And I'm going to use one last piece from the Maha. People can go out and read the rest. And inevitably, once it comes out, we will be diving into it. But one last point on that is, my kids don't trust labels.
Well,
I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they don't trust labels. They don't trust food brands. So you could tell them this is healthy for you or this is what they don't believe it. They're going to go out to social media and get their own answers. And we both know what that means. But to your point, like we're kind of worried about a lot of things that for the next generation, it's irrelevant and it's not going to change. My kids are not going to suddenly become label readers. And,
this is like, is it going to hit critical mass? So
right.
we want the market tipping. There are CPGs that refuse to believe Nielsen's data that says people want to be healthier. And I think the warning here is the consumers are moving a lot faster, and anybody who can sort of satiate their need and educate them. That whole process, the marketing process as it applies to food, is an education process.
Absolutely.
And we've identified that 75% of people are label readers because when they walk into the store, they still don't know what they should be buying. And there's a huge opportunity to change that label reading process to make it easier.
So let's shift for a second to I think this is a really important theme. It's listed under the Maha piece, but I think it's why we were at the Heritage Foundation is I think to your point, the Maha report, and this is why it's delayed, is, there's a tremendous amount of political jockeying going on, tremendous amount of political debate going on, very big constituent groups involved here, and it's not an easy thing to navigate. And so I thought both of us were really pleased that one of the statements, positive instead of negative, right, is this embracing of soil health, that soil health is going to be a unifying element within the Maha report, within things. And I think both of us were super happy about that. And I think I'll just add this in there for you to speak to is also this, we were told that, small farms, organic farms that have historically had a very difficult challenge because they can't get, there's so many hurdles for them that is a focal point as well. So let's make it easier for them. Let's remove the friction so that we can bring some of this back. Why don't you speak to those two before we move into some of the pillars?
Yeah, we could probably do, as I said, I think on this post, is any one of these ideas once conquered by an entrepreneur could make him $1 billion.
Yeah. By the way, my husband asked me if he could get a call with us so that he could ask. I'm not kidding you. And he brought this up the other day. He said, like, I didn't understand what he was saying to me when I walked in the door Friday. Or no, he picked me up at the airport and he said, can I schedule a call with you and Carter to where to invest $100,000? And I didn't understand. Like, he was reacting to this post. He's like, no, I took it as a call to action. Like, I'm supposed to get on the phone with the two of you and you're going to tell me where to invest my money. So there you go, Carter.
Okay. So I think the soil health concept goes even back to the conversation that we had that Senator Marshall hosted, that I attended and was a speaker at, with Secretary Rollins and Secretary Kennedy. And that is that when we were thinking through, we spent a lot of time with conventional agriculture and with regenerative agriculture and with the food system and the healthcare system. And my personal opinion is that banning Roundup will burn a lot of energy. Innovating something that replaces Roundup will burn less energy. And so that, I don't know if I can skip logic here, but basically the soil health concept is nutritional density. We want more nutritional density in crops. Nutritional density relates to food taste and to the quality of those foods in regards to our health and 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 such. So the principle here that we sort of introduced a couple months ago, and has certainly been an idea of others, is the connection between agriculture and health is soil health. Soil, the nutrition comes from the soil. It's metabolized into the crop for the most part through the microbiome. It ends up in the crop. It then is expressed back into that crop, and we can detect it, and it shows up in our food in various ways. But really, it's not really, to some degree, it's the genetics of the crop, but it's also where the crop is grown and what the soil is. So if we want healthier food, we need healthier soil. And then to get healthier soil typically requires more focus on regenerative practices. So while you can boost something like protein through traditional chemistry, you can't really boost all the other nutrients
Yep.
if the microbiome is weak. And so the practices, as people learn how to apply regenerative practices, we can increase nutritional density and make it better. So the soil component of this becomes a unifying theme. If we want to get rid of chronic disease, we need better soil health. If we want farmers to be productive and to be able to reduce their cost of inputs, we need better soil health. It just keeps showing up in multiple venues in a slightly different way in each case, but it becomes a common language. And we've seen this. We're seeing this on the healthcare side. I don't quite think healthcare doctors fully get it yet, but I think certainly people who've grown up around farms are sensitive to their soil health and what needs to be done. People in the food system understand it. And I think people who understand the food is medicine and food is health movement all recognize the value of it, and really an underpinning of the report. So a lot of the MAHA report, I think, leans heavier over on the NIH side of things and the FDA side. But the unifying theme here is, instead of banning chemicals, why don't we just move to practices where farmers are incentivized by demand for regenerative product to move away from chemicals, which both reduces their cost of inputs and also really, it may not, if done correctly, may not affect yield in a material enough way that they can then be more profitable and they can deliver it, and they have better soil health and such. And so,
Yeah. So then let's use that as a transition for a second. So I'm going to transition us a bit into the Tufts event. And you mentioned Nielsen, and Nielsen was at the Tufts event. And so, yes, anybody listening to this that is not part of that council, you really should pick up the phone and call Katie Stebbins and join, because it is a really insightful and powerful convening of innovators in this food as health space. I would say we're truly lacking enough healthcare. But that's because of, I think, a lot of what we've written about in the Substack, which is that the majority of what we would consider healthcare today is really not interested in root cause and connecting back to the inputs, but it's really, it's focused on the monetization of sickness. And I'm not saying that in a mean, negative manner. It's just reality. So Nielsen, I thought, did a fantastic job, as usual, of really walking through the data to make it pretty hard to debate that consumers have already shifted their desires. And I think GLP-1s, and we've written about this quite a bit, but GLP-1s have really shifted buying behaviors in a marked manner. And I personally, I thought it was really interesting having some conversations with, I think it was Roni from CJ, right? Foods. Am I saying that wrong?
yeah.
He really, I think, had a bit of a aha in some of the conversations that we had around how perhaps you traditionally look at a consumer's buying behavior and their expenditures and, a share of that, and really starting to challenge himself of what are consumers really looking for now. And it really brought about a lot of interesting conversation.
So this relates a little bit back to the small farms conversation. So, I do want to be one thing about regenerative agriculture is it is more cognitive load on the farmer. It requires more effort on the farmer to think through their situations and use more diagnostics to counteract an insect or pest infestation, and how to monitor the soil over years, and it requires them to do a lot more. So it's more cognitive load. And so as we think about scaling regenerative, there's 600 million cultivated acres in the United States, 300 million in row crop or so, maybe a little bit more. And then often we say, oh, well, we need more small farms. Well, 600 acres out of 300 million acres is a lot of small farms. And that's not even, probably still considered a large farm. So if you're running these operations and you're trying to do regenerative, there's a lot of value in that. These are complex systems. Scale matters. I know that there's a lot of concern about institutional farming. There's also a lot of value in that, like, I've got 20 employees on a 20,000 acre farm, and I've got someone who can solely focus on making sure we get regenerative right. If you get to smaller farms, it's the owner has to do that. So as we think about scale and how to scale this, it's uncertain what the right form factor is. Is it at what scale, if you're a regenerative row crop or you're a regenerative specialty or you're doing livestock? We see people that are running livestock herds of 20, 600, and 90,000. So there's a lot of scale and differences in here. But what is very specifically one thing that I think makes a lot of sense is the effort under MAHA is to basically say, look, we should be able to authorize organic farms faster. So maybe it shouldn't be a 3-year washout period on organic farms moving away from conventional. And then second is make it so that you can do more direct to consumer. Right now, if you're on those farms, you hit a lot of scale and approval that's appropriate if you're JBS running, 1,000 cattle through your operation in a day to slaughter them. If you're running a smaller operation with a smaller herd, or your different kind of farming practices, maybe it's okay that there's a little bit more liberalness there. Now, the benefit of that is we get more small farms understanding what the local demand, and we open up demand. And it could be that those small farms learn to scale, or it could be that now local communities better understand what their sourcing decisions are, and they might change. Maybe they start buying organic from Walmart. Maybe they don't, but they get exposed to this stuff in more opportunities. And so I think freeing up the side of the market really is great from an innovation standpoint, because it opens up new opportunities.
So I'm going to mix it up a little, because I know we were going to try and keep this to about 45 minutes. And if I go through all 13 of our pillars, we will not be done in 10 minutes, let's call it. So I'm going to jump around just a little bit. So I think I just want to stop for a second. I just want to go back for just a second on this notion of GLP-1s, because I think people still don't really understand what's happened there. And I felt like there was some conversation I was involved in that helped with that, which was, if you think about what folks on GLP-1s are doing, they're eating less. They don't. That is what is happening from a clinical perspective, a physical perspective.
I didn't know this, but my mom always ate cottage cheese. I've never found cottage cheese terribly pleasing, but there's a shortage of cottage cheese because it's the highest protein per calorie density out there, and the people on GLP-1s are eating it when they're on a 1,000-calorie a day diet.
Well, so that's the point, is that they truly cannot eat what they used to eat, but they are trying not to muscle waste, and they're trying to maintain the weight loss. And so eating very high amounts of protein is really important in terms of how they're eating. And so what we heard was, it's not necessarily that people are trying to spend less, right? So if they were spending $100 buying, $3,000 calories a day, they're still fine spending $100 on 1,000 calories a day,
Yeah.
but it has to be the right. And I think what's really important about that is it shows what you and I have been sort of saying, which is, people are okay spending a certain amount of money, right? Like I heard repeatedly citations of that report of the combined, healthcare and food expenditure of 25% thing. This GLP-1 is one of the first examples of where somebody's healthcare decision is directly impacting how much they're spending on food, right? And I would say probably somebody is stepping back and saying, how much am I spending on the GLP-1s? How much am I spending on the food? How do I sort of reconcile all that in my mind, right? But their food is very much tied to what they need from a health perspective, not what they need from a cost perspective.
Well, I
Um,
think and this gets to how Costco should be thinking about its market basket and how Nestle should be thinking about what they're doing. The the data you're referencing is a study the last 100 years. U.S. homes have spent, I think it was 27% on the combined cost of healthcare and food for the last 100 years, around 25, 27%. Very consistent number. Healthcare and food. 100 years ago, healthcare cost was 2%, food cost was 25%. Today, food cost is 7%, and healthcare cost is 18% of household spend. So that the thing that we need to recognize, if you're in the CPG industry, or if you're in the packaged good industry, if you're in the grocery industry, if you're in the agriculture industry, is consumers are doing this calculus around food and health. They are doing it.
yep.
They
And they've
have
been doing it.
they have an economic price elasticity curve running around in their brain. They are different, and what that means is there is likely, if people are monolithically offering product on a price performance basis, on just a price basis, we're going to build cheap food because people want cheap food. They are leaving. There is everybody's reservation price out there economically is at a whole bunch of different levels. You have dead weight loss in the marketplace. I don't know how big it is, but there is pricing that no matter what the demographic is, and I think that the Nielsen data shows this, is that multiple demographics, their reservation price varies, their price elasticity curve varies, and what they are trying to strike this health food balance, but the only tool they're being given is cheap food and poor labeling. And so they have to read the label, they have to struggle to figure this stuff out, and a certain amount of time they just give up in that process because there's friction, and the optimization they're trying to do around their health has got a friction because they're not doctors. They're not able to understand all this stuff. They don't trust the label. And so it's not a surprise that they go to an influencer to try to get some help, because that influencer is doing a better job than the brands at educating the consumer.
I think most people are doing a better job. Most people other than healthcare and food is doing a better job. So, which brings me to
Well, hold on, I want to put a fine point on that. If a category of cottage cheese of a particular brand is stocking out nationwide,
yeah,
because consumers have caught on to the fact that they can get the right protein content on 1,000 calories a day on GLP-1 while they're trying to. Consumers have figured it out. That is a pretty technical conclusion, enough so that the category is sold out nationwide.
well, it's also it's the brand. So it is a combo. I want to be clear.
That's a good argument for the brand has explained it sufficiently.
No, they have. It's good culture. I mean, I last night I went because I fell prey And I ate some of the cottage cheese, some of the good cultured cottage cheese that was in the refrigerator that my daughter had bought, who's home from school. And I'm not sure if she bought it on my card or hers. And I had this feeling of like, I better replace that thing of cottage cheese, right? Because I'm going to get called out on it. And they didn't have any more. It was out. And somebody said at the event, like, if you don't go on, to Whole Foods on like Tuesday at 9 a.m., you can't get your good culture. And I was like, but you're exactly right. They've done a really good job on that brand of its health benefits, because it also is a probiotic. Like, they've done a really good job of tapping into, and I would argue that they tap into a lot of what social media is capturing. That, again, it goes back to, sort of like culpable denial or liability is, there's this feeling of like, well, I can't tell people that it's this or this or this because of all these things. And so then, the kid down the street, well, he doesn't have any worries, so he can talk about it.
Hey, an Instagram influencer can make the label claim for you.
Exactly.
That'll send the FDA
So,
into work. But
well, yeah.
the practical reality is that they can make that label claim quicker. Food Babe basically wiped out the dye industry.
Yeah.
It put the death blow to the dye industry, a petroleum-based dye industry, quicker than 40 years of scientists.
I know
that it was bad for you.
So, all right. So here's one of the pillars, which ties directly into this, which was retail, make health the default. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge opportunity when we talk about kind of quote unquote blue ocean. You mentioned, these were the things that you mentioned in the piece, or we mentioned in the piece, was cart coaching at the point of decision, bundles that guarantee, how this is described, I would argue that just bundles in general, that, healthy bundles are critical for people. Category rewires, the idea of gold, silver, and bronze shelves tied to metabolic attributes, and then local direct-to-consumer rails. I mean,
yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. So, and we did say we're going to do 45 minutes, and I think now that we realize how long it's going to take, maybe we should do another.
We'll do a part 2. This will be part 1.
So let's maybe wrap it up around this. The okay. Geranimals. You want to wrap it up on geranimals? Should we tell everybody about?
Is that what we're going to do? I love it. Let's not give all of our ideas away. Let's lay a breadcrumb on this one, Carter.
Okay, so you remember Hamburger Helper?
We have some in our hurricane provisions.
You have Hamburger Helper?
We have Hamburger Helper in our hurricane. This is in our hurricane provisions. I figure if we have no power and we are at risk of spontaneously combusting because of the heat and the humidity here, because homeowners insurance won't even cover, we can't even have a battery backup or solar panels on our house here, or we won't have homeowners insurance, which is a whole other thing. So I have to be able to boil stuff.
You're going to get the hamburger.
There will be no hamburger. It will just be the helper. We will be living off of
you're
800 chemicals, and like I might spontaneously combust from eating that.
Let's just go back to the notion of this. So,
all right, people do like to have a little bit of fun banter, but yes, let's go into it.
There is a certain amount of Hamburger Helpers sold a lot of hamburger.
Yes.
In the day.
Yes.
And so the notion of this is I'm trying to figure out how much not to say here, but the notion of this idea is you have the center of the store and the brand, you have these giant brands that really sell center of the store, the shelf stable UPF related products, and they spend $15 billion a year, and they convince you that you should eat Oreos and Reese's peanut butter cup mixed together. So they have an amazing amount of capability. Now, what if they were able to engineer products, let's call it grains, or better interesting grains, but then orchestrated on top of it a labeling construct within the store that basically said you should have grains, protein, and fresh veg. And that as you walk through the store, there was a corner that said item 1, which is your grains, item 2, which is your protein, and item 3, which is your fresh veg, and item 4, which might be spices. Now you can imagine your kid, you've got this kind of experience in the store where each category is going on, and the experience of shopping is which items from item column number 1 do I want to buy, which columns from number 2, which columns from number 3, which column number 4. And you can imagine kids sort of on social TikTok sort of saying, well, you should try this from item 1, this from item 2, this from item 3, and this from item 4. Now all of a sudden you've taken the brand capability and power and sophistication of the brands from a CPG land and intermixed it with helping promoting the adjacent brands of proteins and meat, which really don't have any brand power, but you've delivered better nutrition to the individual, and you've created some simplicity for mom and dad as to how to prepare a meal, because all of a sudden the kid can start making decisions that relate to their choice of taste, but it's still sort of organized a bit in sort of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 category without the burden of costing a whole bunch of things on the label to make people have to hunt and peck to make a decision. So,
but see, that's where we'll leave it and say, but we have about 50 other ideas of how to make that even more exciting.
Right.
But we aren't going to share that right now.
We got to figure out whether we're going to use that for our own $1 billion idea or not.
Exactly. Because we can't just give all of the ideas away and not and watch all of the people that listen to us and read us do really, really well. And we're just
maybe if 10 people sign up for a subscription, we'll give away another.
That's it. There you go. And also, to any CPG out there that's curious, we're here.
Yeah, we're coin operated.
Yes, exactly.
But the cool thing about what is happening, and we appreciate everybody's contribution here, is we're learning more. There's a lot of feedback going on here in terms of really understanding what's going on in the marketplace. I do think we should do another podcast on this because the rest of this list is interesting.
Yeah, the rest of the list is super interesting, and we haven't talked to each other with a video camera or a microphone for a while. So
let's do this again.